Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to the Undiscovered Games video podcast, where we take a look at the lesser known board games of the world and share those with you. On today's episode, we're looking at a heavy Euro game called Florenza. This is from 2010, designed by Stefano Grappi. In Florenza, players are going to be hiring famous artists to help them complete works of art for points and recurring income. It uses a complex contract fulfillment mechanism along with a Caylus-style worker placement, where everybody places their workers first, and then it triggers in a specific order. Also, like Caylus or Lords of Waterdeep, you can build new worker placement areas that anybody can access. You can use your opponent's worker spots at a cost, and that's one of my favorite mechanisms in worker placement. So all those things made me want to try Florenza. Now, after 2 plays at 4 players, I have very mixed feelings about this game. I'm going to tell you that right up front. Usually on this channel, I like to feature games I'm very excited about, games I love, games I'm passionate about featuring and bringing to you. Florenza, I'm still on the fence, and the reason I'm on the fence is because it's a very long game, lots of procedural upkeep each round, lots of analysis paralysis, which means lots of downtime, and it's a game where the more players you have, the longer it's going to take. Now, that doesn't make it a bad game. In fact, Board Game Geek suggests this is best at 3 players, and that's one of the reasons I'm holding on to this game for now, because I really do want to try this at 3 players. We played twice at 4 players. Our first game of this was a long game. It took almost 6 hours to complete because we had to learn the game from scratch, and it just took about a round or 2 to really grasp, what we needed to do. But the nice thing is the rules are very simple once you see how the game works. For as complex and heavy as this game is, it's pretty straightforward from a rules point of view, and I didn't have any issues with anybody at the table remembering the rules, so that's a very big positive for me. It's just that procedural upkeep of each round, step by step by step, and the more players you have at the table, the longer that stuff's going to take to get through. So I want to give you a brief overview of the game. I'm not going to go over everything in this video, but I can show you basically how it plays, and hopefully you can decide if this is going to be one for you. It's a long-term planner's paradise. I'll warn you up front. It's a very strategic game, not as tactical, and typically I like a more tactical approach to a board game where you're reacting more to your opponents and not so much planning out this long involved turn. But again, it has some things I really like, so let's take a look at it. Out on the table, you're going to see this circular board, which looks really cool. This houses all the cubes. There's like 6 different color cubes here, and these are just going to be used for cashing in for these different artworks. So each of these artworks out here has a certain requirement of cubes that you need to save up and cash them in to complete these works of art for points, as well as recurring income every round. You also notice over here we have all these different famous artists you can hire. These are all real historical people that were in Italy, and there's a whole blurb in the back of the rule book about each one of these characters, different artwork on all the cards. It's a really cool historical theme here, even though the game is very much a dry, mechanical cube pusher. Here, each player gets an individual player board with a workshop, as well as some personal works of art that you can work on throughout the game. Up here is where we keep track of our victory points, as well as turn order, the round track. The game lasts 8 rounds, so we track that here. And finally, this is each player's hierarchy in the church, and I'll go over all that in a moment. Now, before I show you all the different steps of the round, I want to jump to the heart of the game, which is the worker placement. This is step 4 in the round. Everybody has, by default, 4 workers to use each round. Now, there's ways to unlock these other workers, which I'll talk about in a minute, but the round looks like this. Players take turns placing 1 disc at a time until everybody passes or can't place anymore, and then everything triggers in a specific order. So it's kind of like Caylus. You place all your things out first, and then it triggers in order. But in this game, it's a little harder to see the order that things will happen because you're placing your discs on your own workshop as well as other players' workshops. In a game like Caylus, you have all that information in the center of the table on a shared board. So that's one thing I don't necessarily like in this game, is it's really hard to see the order that everything triggers, especially because your workers are going to be split between your own workshop and other players' workshops. So you're going to be looking all around the table, and then you got to remember the turn order is going to change every round. So it's just hard to visualize the order that everything is actually going to take place. And, that's a minor gripe I have with this game, but I still like the way this does it. So let me show you more about it. When you place a worker, you have essentially 5 options. You can just place it on a workshop space to gain that benefit. So like a lot of these workshop spaces are just going to give you straight cubes. Some of them are going to let you convert cubes into money. Some of them let you, convert some money into more money and things like that. Very basic worker placement ideas here. If you want to use an opponent's tile, you can place it in their workshop on an empty tile. So if I wanted to use the red player's tile here to gain a yellow cube for myself, I just go there. Now I have to pay them 1 victory point to do that. So I go down on the track, they go up on the track. Very simple idea to use other players' stuff. The only problem is these tiles are small, and then the icons on the tiles are teeny tiny. I don't know why they didn't make these very bold and easy to see, because it's really difficult to look around the table every turn and see what everybody has available to use. But I really like the idea, it's just kind of hard to see. Another way to use a worker is to build another workshop tile, to open up a new worker placement spot for anyone to use. There's a nice list here of all the available tiles. You can choose any one of these that you want to build. You're just going to have to make sure that you have enough cubes and money to build each one by the time that triggers when we go through each space in order. So you just need to plan that out ahead of time. Like, oh, this one requires me to have this many cubes and money. I got to make sure I'm actually going to be able to collect that stuff before this triggers where I actually build it. So again, this is a game that's very much a long-term planning type of a game, and that really messes with me. I have to write down my plans because I forget, am I going to get enough cubes to build this when it triggers and things like that. So if you want to build something, you choose any one of these, place it face down on your board, place your disc on it, and when that triggers, you have to have those resources. You're going to probably get some victory points. Most of these generate some kind of victory points when you build them. Then they flip, and now anybody can access this spot on future rounds. This sheet, though, is really nice. It shows what each building requires to be built, how many victory points you get when you build it, and then over here is the benefit of the tile once it's built. Now, I will say, if you could laminate these sheets, or if you could slip them in one of those folders that has the laminated front, you could use a dry erase marker and just mark off, when people buy these, because it's very difficult to keep track of who has built what, especially later in the game. And you'll see here, the ones with the darker background, that means there's only one of these in the whole stack, whereas the ones with the lighter background means there's multiple, but some have 2 available, some have 4 available. You could just lay out all the building tiles in a big grid if you have a big enough table to do that. Our table is just not big enough to hold all this stuff, so we had to make a stack of all these and then just kind of go through them. And as long as they're in numerical order, it's pretty easy to look through the stack and find the stuff you need. But again, that just adds to the time that it takes to play this game. So the third way you can use a worker is hiring an artist. And this is the way you're going to get the most victory points in the game. The artists are going to help you complete these works of art. There's gray bordered areas all over this game. You have some on your personal player board. These are artworks that only you can do. And then you have the shared board with a bunch of artworks that are up for grabs for any of the players to go for. So all the artworks basically look the same. If I want to complete this one, I need a yellow cube, 3 white cubes, and $150. And then the artist I put there has to be skilled in either architecture or painting. So the artist that I put there has to match one of these skills. Once this artwork is completed, I will instantly get 4 victory points, 1 level up in the church, as well as this recurring benefit when we collect income. So this says every round I'm going to get 1 point if I have this artwork completed when we collect income. So again, back to the worker placement. Let's say I want to reserve this space to work on. I have to hire an artist with my worker. So the artist, again, has to match one of these skills. So let's say I take this guy here. He is an architect, as shown up here at the top. I take this tile, place it on the artwork I wish to complete, and place my disc there. I just have to have this stuff by the time we do the artwork section of the round. So we're going to do all the collection of our goods first, and then be able to pay those goods to complete the artwork. So I just have to make sure that I get all this stuff by the end of the round. Again, very much a long-term planning type of a game. One thing that's kind of tricky to remember as well, when you hire these artists, you're also going to have to pay their costs. So each of these artists up here has a cost. So you're going to have to pay this money down here on the space when you build this, as well as have enough money to pay the artist himself. So it's kind of a tricky thing. You got to really, add this number to that number and keep all that straight in your head, because you don't get to do this right away. You're just reserving this for later. It's a lot to keep track of, but it's a very straightforward concept. You just need to collect these resources, match up the artist type, and have that stuff by the time this triggers. So you can do as much artwork in a round as you have workers available. As long as you're able to get all the resources, you could potentially complete 3 or 4 artworks in a single round, which would be huge if you can pull off that long-term precision planning. If you complete the art on your own personal board, you're going to get some points, and if you don't complete all these, you're going to lose some points at the end of the game. So there's a nice balancing act of when to build on the main board versus your own personal board. However, building on your personal board does not give you that recurring income every round, and the more stuff you build out on the main board is going to give you some really nice benefits every time you collect income. So there's a great little balancing act of where to build and when, and that's the kind of stuff I do like in games. So again, I'm very torn here. I don't like all the long-term planning, but I do like the little, when do I build where? Oh no, I better get that artist before my opponent jumps in and takes the artist, because some of these artists are better than others. You have to evaluate which ones you want to hire. How much do you want to pay? And they're going to give you a benefit when they complete the work of art, shown down here at the bottom. Once your artwork gets completed, you get to roll a d6 die, and it's going to determine your payout from that artist. So some of these artists, if you pay them, the extra money, they're going to potentially give you more points, but it is based on a die roll, and I know some of you out there won't like that. I have kind of mixed feelings on that as well, because for a game this, precise and this well thought out, it just seems a little weird to determine based on a die roll how many points this artist pays. But on the other hand, I like the push your luck of, do I go with a cheaper artist who's, not going to give me as many points, but I can save some money and I'm still going to get some points? Or do I pay a little more money to this artist and potentially get more points if I roll better? So there's a nice little push your luck there. It just felt kind of weird at times when a player went through all this work to get this really nice big artwork done, and then they roll like a 1 and they only get an extra point from this guy. There is a no dice variant to this game that's designed by the game designer that you can look up on Board Game Geek, and if you like no dice, then I would recommend that. I kind of like the little push your luck of, do I pay more to potentially get more points? That was kind of fun. And another thing I forgot to note is there's always these neutral artists up at the top that you can hire, and they are free to hire. So they're all going to be proficient in the skill that you need to complete the work. They're not going to charge you any money to hire them, but they're not going to give you a very good payout after the work is complete. So the bonus when you roll that die might even lose you a point if you use these neutral artists. So that's where I do like the dice rolling in this game, because it really has a nice push your luck feel. Do I want to spend more money to potentially get more points, or do I want to go cheap and risk, maybe losing a point, but not wasting all my money hiring these expensive artists? So anyway, back to the worker placement. So we talked about placing on a workshop. We talked about building a workshop. We talked about hiring an artist. The fourth option you have with your worker is called giving to charity, which is how you get more workers to use throughout the round. So again, everybody starts with 4 workers, but if you give to charity, you can get more workers unlocked. And that's where these little church guys come into play up top. They have this cross symbol. There's generic ones, just like the artists, and then there's some more expensive ones maybe down here, depending on how these come out. When you hire the church guy, though, you have to pay them right away. So it's like you're giving to charity, and they're going to grant you some more workers to use. If you go with the more expensive ones, you roll the D6, and they will determine how many workers you get to take. If you go with the generic one, you're always going to get just 2 workers. So let's say I want to take the generic church guy. I take him off the board. I have to pay $100 right now to the bank. I put him here in my pulpit, put my disc there, and then I just take 2 more discs from the supply and add them to my board, which I can then use when it's my turn again. All these guys come out randomly here. Sometimes there's going to be some really nice church guys that'll give you a lot of extra workers, but if you do some of these works out here on the board, you're going to get extra workers as part of your income, and then you wouldn't even have to worry about giving to charity. So it's kind of a nice little balancing act there too. Like, do you build here to get better income and just get the workers every round so you don't have to worry about giving to charity every time? Or do you not worry about those, just get a bunch of money and then just get the charity every time and get all your workers that way? Great balancing act, great decisions. Another thing I like about the game. The final option you have when you place a worker is sending them to this market space here. There's room for 1 disc of each player on this space. So every player has access to the market every round. And what this says is you can do each of these transactions 1 time as long as you placed a disc there to do that. You can buy 1 cube, sell 1 cube, and or trade 2 cubes for another cube. But again, you can only do that if you send a disc there, and you can only do that 1 time each. Another tricky thing about the market is the market is the first thing that happens. So we do the market before we go around and collect all our stuff from these workshops. When we were playing this tripped me up a lot because I was thinking in my head, oh, I'm going around and getting all these cubes from these workshops. I can trade some of these for the cubes that I need at the market. Well, no, the market happens before you get all your cubes. So the market has to be with stuff you already have in your possession. So that's just a pro tip. If you're playing this for the first time, make sure everybody at the table understands the order of operations in this game. You're placing your workers, then we do the market, then we collect from the workshops, then we do our artwork last. And that's what we'll get into next because we talked about all the ways you can use a worker. Now we'll talk about how these all resolve. So once everybody places all their workers or everybody has passed, now we proceed to the market. And this is where you go in turn order based on this chart here. Again, I'll get into all the turn order stuff later. After we do the market, we go in turn order, 1 workshop tile at a time in order, 1, 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. So we go player by player, 1 space at a time. So if the turn order was red, then blue, then yellow, we would go to red's number 1 workshop tile. Whoever has their disc there gets to do that spot. So that's just collect a yellow cube. Then we go to the blue player's number 1 workshop tile. Whoever has their disc there gets to collect their goodies, and so on. Then you go to the number 2 tile and the number 3 tile and the number 4 tile. You just go down the line in turn order, player by player. This takes a long time, especially later in the game as you build up more and more and more workshop tiles. I still like this, but I just wish it didn't take so long to go through and divvy out all this stuff. Once all the players collect all their stuff, then we proceed to the artwork, again in turn order. Each player tries to complete at least, all the different art that they've reserved. So anywhere they've hired an artist, like with their disc on it, they have to now pay all the required resources and money to complete the work of art. So again, you have to pay the cubes, the cost of the space, as well as the cost of the artist. And that's kind of tricky, once again, to remember to pay the artist and the cost on the space. Once you do that, you place your crest tile on that spot, immediately get your victory points and or church track points. And then this says now that your crest is here, this is complete, and you get this income every round of the game. After you complete the work, then you roll the D6 to determine your extra point payout based on the artist, and you just use their track at the bottom of the card. So what happens if you get to this point and you're like, oh no, I don't have enough money or I don't have enough cubes to complete this art. I've already hired the artist, but I can't complete the art. You're going to lose victory points. If you do that on your personal player board, it's only a 1-point loss. If you do that out here on these outer districts, you're going to lose 2 points. And if you do it in the center, most prestigious area, you're going to lose 3 points. And it's just a very unforgiving game if you don't plan that out precisely, especially when, you can do multiple works in a single round. You can commit to doing, 2 or 3 works. You got to make sure that you're going to get all the money and cubes that you need saved up. And that's the thing where, I found it difficult to keep track of where I was getting all my resources from because you're placing your discs on your opponent's workshops too. And this wouldn't bother me as much if the game didn't last so long. But when I'm investing over 3 hours in a board game and then I'm just like out of the game because I failed to get 1 green cube that I thought I was going to be able to get, but then I just totally forgot to pick up. It just is very, very unforgiving and not really in a fun way. There's other games like Caylus, like I talk about. Vanuatu is a great worker placement game that's very punishing because of the player interaction and players going where you want to go and stuff, cutting you out of actions. That I like in a game. This game, I feel like, just punishes you for failing the memory exercise of needing to remember all these cubes you need to collect. So that's kind of a different type of unforgiving nature of a game where it's like you're just failing the game. You're not failing because the other players cut you out of a spot. Now, it does have that as well, and that I do like in Florenza because, you might need that one yellow cube, and then your opponent comes in and takes that one spot that you built specifically just to get that yellow cube. I do feel that tension in this game, and I like that. But what I don't like is gathering this very complex recipe of ingredients, and then, oh no, I was one short because I just miscalculated it, and now I feel like I'm totally out of the hunt. But I do want to reserve my complete judgment until I try this with 3 players, because I know for a fact that the game will not last as long with 3. All right, so I want to talk about like the rest of the round because I only showed you the meat of the game, which is the worker placement. But what about all this other procedural stuff I was talking about? So at the end of the round, there's all this stuff you do. You have to shift these artists down a column. Some of these artists will leave the game completely if they're in this last column here. And then you draw new artists from the bag here, and you have to match up these tiles to their appropriate card in this deck. Now it's kind of cool because there's like different artwork on all these cards. There's all these different artists and architects and stuff. The problem is you have to dig through this deck every time and match it up with the tile. Another thing that kind of bothered me about this deck of cards is these people don't feel that different from each other. They cycle through here. It's supposed to simulate like their limited time here in the city, and you have to get them while they're here before they go out and do other stuff. And I don't really feel like that came through because there's always, the same amount of people out here to choose from. And yeah, they're different names and slightly different costs and abilities, but it didn't feel like there was that much variation. I almost wish that these were a lot swingier, like maybe one guy cost 100 and another guy cost 600, but maybe this guy pays out potentially like 10 or 15 points or something crazy, where you can really weigh that decision on both ends of the spectrum, like the super cheap guy or the super expensive guy. This doesn't really give you much variety as far as weighing that option. And I really liked that decision in the game of, do I spend a little more to potentially get a better payout when I roll that die? So that's a minor complaint. I can live with it how it is. I'm just saying, as I'm thinking about things that I would like to see in this game, I thought that would have been pretty cool if there was more variety in this deck. Anyway, I want to move on to something I do really, really enjoy, and that is the mechanism for determining turn order for the next round of the game. So at the end of the round, whoever is highest up on the victory point track is going to become captain of the people, and they get to go first next round. You move their token here, and you give them the captain of the people card. And how this works is you reset their point track to 0. Now, they get to bank the points they had, so they just take certificates to sort of bank those points. If they had 21 points, you would give them 21 points of certificates, and they stash those away. But their point tracker goes back to 0, which means they're not going to be captain of the people for a while unless they have a really, really good turn and get out ahead of the pack again. So that's kind of how you determine start player. Then you determine who is the bishop for the next round, and that's whoever is highest up on this church track here. You have to be past this bishop space to even qualify to be the bishop, but if you're highest up on this track, past this space, you take the bishop card, you go second in turn order, and then the rest of the players just stay where they were in that turn order. So it's kind of a neat idea to change out the turn order and also keep some of your victory points hidden while also keeping some of them visible. So I just thought that was pretty neat and innovative. Now, when you reset the round, obviously you move the round track up, and now you start the round by collecting income. Now, I don't mind the income in this game. I like it. It drives your decisions as far as which artworks to complete because they're going to give you more income. I just felt like collection of income took a little bit too long in this game. Each player gets their base level of income shown on your player board, which is your 4 workers, 200 coins. You get a white cube, a brown cube, and then you got to roll the d6 for a random cube based on this chart. Each player does this. Then you have to look out at the completed works. Wherever your little crest is on the board, you're going to get that income. Sometimes it's points, sometimes it's extra worker, sometimes it's a bump up on the church track. And then there's these little purple workshop tiles, which also give you income. So anything on these, you got to collect. So I just feel like there's a lot of things to keep track of when you do the income. Each player's making sure that they get all their stuff they need. And I would say this took easily 3 to 4 minutes each round just collecting income. 8 rounds in the game, that means like a half hour of just collecting income, at least in our experience. Now, as you get better and better at the game, hopefully that won't be as bad. But I just felt like it was a little tricky to make sure you're getting everything you're entitled to. These crest tokens, while they look really cool, some of them are hard to distinguish from each other. For example, the red player and the yellow player both have red and yellow in the crest. So it's just kind of hard to remember, like, oh, wait, that's mine. No, that's my opponent's. So, things like that just kind of bug me a little bit and make it a little more challenging than it needs to be to just do basic functions like collecting income. Anyway, after the income, we move on to the Captain of the People. So remember, one player got Captain of the People. Whoever has that card gets to do their special function. They have one of two choices. They can either screw up an opponent by making them lose a worker for the round. So they take a worker and detain him up here for the entire round. Or they can reserve an artist for themselves only for this round and place the artist up with this detained guy here, and then only the Captain of the People can hire that artist this round. Again, if there would be more variety in these artist cards, I would like this a lot more, but as it is, this just felt a little bit bland to me. Like, oh no, they took that artist, well, I guess I'll just take a different artist, So it didn't really feel that meaningful for the Captain of the People to have a certain artist reserved for them. More often than not, they just caused another player to lose a worker, and I don't mind that. Then you go to the Bishop. Now the Bishop can either detain one of the church guys up here that nobody can access this whole round, or the Bishop can convert a worker of an opponent to themselves. So that opponent loses one worker and the Bishop gains one worker, and as you can bet, the Bishop 9 times out of 10 is going to choose that option of screwing over an opponent. So a little bit of meanness in that first couple steps of each round, not anything game-changing. I don't think it was that meaningful, really, and it really felt kind of tacked on to me. I like the turn order idea of the Captain of the People and the Bishop, but as far as like their special function at the beginning of the round, it just didn't feel that meaningful, other than kind of a way to keep a runaway player in check. Like if they had like 7 workers as part of their starting income, well, the Captain of the People is probably going to take out one of their workers, and then the Bishop is going to probably convert one of their workers. So they're going to be down to 5 again. So I don't know, it felt a little tacked on. It felt like it just added unnecessary length to the game, but I'm sure there's a reason the designer put that in there. After you do all that, you go into the worker placement once again, and you just repeat that process 8 rounds of the game, and at the end of the game, whoever has the most points is the winner. There are a few different end game point things, like every 300 money is a point, every 3 cubes you have left over is a point, any empty spaces on your personal board is -1 point, but the vast majority of your points come during the game as you complete those works of art, and then when you're Captain of the People, you bank those points and keep them secret. So I like that the game keeps some of your points secret and some of them visible. I just found that interesting. Some of you out there might not like that, others will. I just found it kind of cool because it was different. So Florenza, I think I covered the majority of the gameplay. I certainly didn't go over every rule. There's a lot going on in this game, but I wanted to give you an idea of how it plays as well as things I like and dislike about it. Once again, I'm really holding out for a game of this at 3 players. I'm really hopeful that that game delivers for me, and it really, excites me enough to keep this in my collection, because this game does a lot of things I really like in games, specifically the idea of building worker spaces that other players can use at a cost, potentially cutting you out of getting access to that. And I love that kind of player interaction. I just wish it was a little easier to visualize how everything was going to happen in this game, because the icons and the tiles are really small. It's just kind of hard on the eyes, and the game takes up a lot of table space, but I feel like they could have condensed a lot of this stuff and made a smaller board, maybe use small cards for these artist things over here, things like that just, it takes up a ton of room on the table, but I don't really feel like there's a lot to look at. You just have to look really far across the table to see the important things. So very mixed feelings on this. I hope this video gives you some idea of if Florenza is right for you. Have you ever played Florenza? Am I way off on this? Like, why did this take us 6 hours to do our first game at 4 players? Have you had that same experience? A lot of it, I think, with our group is we are very AP type players. We like to think out our turns, think deeply about the strategies and stuff. I think that really contributed to the long play time, but I can't deny that all these moving parts was a big part of that as well. I mean, cashing in cubes, getting cubes, converting cubes, hiring artists, putting artists back, shifting the artists down, taking new artists, matching them up to their cards, rolling the die, fiddling with the turn order track, moving that captain of the people back, banking their points, handing out certificates. All that stuff adds up over the course of 8 rounds, and it might not seem like a lot individually, but over the course of the game, that adds a ton of downtime to the game, and I think that's this game's biggest flaw. So if they found a way to streamline that, I would definitely take a look at it. I've heard that the anniversary printing of the game does streamline some things, but I have not tried that. I'd be curious, has anybody out there ever tried the anniversary edition versus this edition? Does it actually fix some of these things? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to read all your comments. Let me know all your thoughts on this episode today. Sorry this wasn't as exciting of a game, like one that I'm saying, hey, go definitely check this out. But I still like to cover these types of games because that's what this channel is all about. It's a discovery. We're discovering the undiscovered games together, and I like to bring you on this journey. When I find a new game like this, I want to share my honest thoughts on it. So there you have it. I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10 for now, which is, right on the cusp of whether I keep a game or get rid of it. Again, I'm going to give this one more chance at 3 players, and once I do that, I will pin a comment below to let you know how that went. But until then, 7 out of 10. Florenza, you can decide if you want to check it out or not. Hopefully you still enjoyed this episode. I enjoyed making it, and even though this game wasn't everything I wanted it to be, I still enjoyed every bit of discovering it and sharing that with you. So thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you're subscribed right here on YouTube. It's at undiscovered_games. You can say hi to me over on Instagram as well, at undiscovered_games. I post a lot of written reviews and cool pictures over there, so make sure you check out my Instagram. And if you want to help the channel farther, there is a donation link in the description below. It's just a PayPal link. You can donate any amount you like. I certainly don't expect that, but I appreciate every one of you who has donated so far. The best way to help the channel, like I always say, is make sure you are subscribed right here on YouTube, and make sure all your board gaming friends are subscribed to this channel as well. So that's the best way to motivate me to keep making content like this. I try to post about every 2 weeks or so, give or take. I don't have a strict posting schedule, but I try to post an episode about every 2 weeks. So I really appreciate all of your support. Thanks so much for, joining me on this journey to discover these undiscovered board games. It's such an awesome hobby, and there's so many more great games I can't wait to bring to you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next video.